day, good evening, everyone. I hope you've had an awesome week. My name is Bekeme Masadi Olola, and you're listening to the Good Citizen Radio Show from CSR in Action. The show is sponsored by ACT Foundation, aka ACT Foundation, which is a grant-making organization established in 2016 to support local, national, and regional nonprofits working in health, environment, entrepreneurship, and leadership to address the various challenges that we have across the continent. Of course, you know why we are a proud grantee of ACT Foundation. Our work is to promote leadership among citizens. We truly believe that the solution to Nigeria's many problems lie with us as citizens. We make up institutions of government, private enterprises, and all whatnot. So today we're actually going to be talking about something that is, replete in our everyday life, education, and particularly we're looking at learning disabilities in Nigeria and how to identify them in children. A UNICEF report says that Nigeria accounts for one in every five of the world's out-of-school children. That's a whopping number. Even though primary education is officially free and compulsory, an estimated 13.5 million children aged 5 to 14 years are not in school. It's also estimated that over 32 million Nigerians are struggling with reading, writing, spelling, comprehension, and other symptoms of dyslexia. According to the Encyclopedia on Early Child Development, learning disability, also called LDs, are problems affecting a child's ability to receive, process, analyze, or store information. So the common ones are dyslexia, dyscalculia, auditory processing disorders, visual perception dysfunctions, attention deficit hyperactivity disorders, and other language processing difficulty. Now, for me, I don't think that that's the challenge. I think that the challenge actually is how to harness the shortcomings of these children to suggest some solutions on how they can not only cope with the disability but also lead successful and productive lives. And the person who will help us dissect this is none other than Air Vice Marshall Femi Gbadebo, OFR. He's a highly skilled communicator, public speaker, and facilitator with a passion for motivating others. He himself is a special needs parent and clearly an OFR, and he's an experienced caregiver and a specialist in the management of cerebral palsy. He has a particular passion for motivating and mentoring parents of children with special needs, youth and adolescents, as well as anyone aspiring to better their lot. Hello, sir. Thank you for coming to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
I hope you've had a great day.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so this would actually end your day well.
Yeah.
So thanks. Can you just, for the sake of clarity, tell us what does learning disability mean that a person cannot learn?
Well, actually, it's been proven beyond reasonable doubt that every person can learn.
Yeah.
It's just that some people learn differently.
Mm-hmm.
And for those people who learn differently, we must learn how to engage them. That is, come down to their level and help them up. And some of them actually, within a little while, cross a level of difficulty and suddenly it's like eureka, and then they just begin to bloom.
Mm-hmm.
So learning difficulties arise from various things. Of course, there are children that are born with developmental disabilities, and most of them are neurological problems, which means something's wrong with the brain.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you get things like cerebral palsy, autism, Down syndrome, and so on. But those are the ones that are easily identifiable. But when you talk about attention deficit disorder, when you talk about things like dyscalculia and dyslexia and so on, they're not so obvious. And the problems with learning difficulty in this area is that when you say a child is disabled, people expect, or even an adult, they expect to see the disability in terms of missing limb, sitting in a wheelchair, or using crutches, or blind, or deaf and dumb. Once you don't have those things, everybody assumes that you're okay.
You're okay, so why are you not meeting up?
And then we live in a culture where when a child is born, particularly in the Yoruba land, what they do is they just quickly check for 2 eyes, 2 ears, 10 fingers, 10 toes, and it's like, wow, perfect child.
Perfect.
But
when you have a baby abroad, there's a brain test, there's a test that you hear well, there's a sight test, all of these things.
Yeah, these things are not done. And that's why, you see, children learn by imitating. And that's why you find that you carry a little child under even 2-3 months. They follow your movements. If there's anything peculiar on your body, like a shining button or something, they even try to touch it. And so on. So by touching, what are they doing? They're exercising. For those who play games like squash and tennis, you learn about
coordination,
eyeball contact. That means to hit that ball, it's not about looking at your hand hitting the ball. It's about looking at the ball and moving your hand and you're making contact.
Right.
So
absolutely.
So there's also exercise involved. Now, what this means is that if a child has some visual problems, the child will not copy, and that's going to affect development of the brain. If the child also has a hearing deficit, the child may also not hear certain instructions. You hear our local, some mothers telling you that this child does not hear a word, meaning the child is stubborn. Because when I call the child, he doesn't respond when I want.
And it could just be a hearing problem.
And it could be a hearing problem. So assuming, and then children also can read body language, which is what most of us don't fail to understand. So as long as the child is looking at you, you say a lot of things, stop it, shout, do this, and you're also gesticulating, they know this is wrong, they stop. Okay? So you assume everything's cool.
Right.
Now, assuming that child is watching television or with their back to you, you will scream and shout until you finally get to the child and smack the child. And what happens if the child has a hearing difficulty? They didn't hear all that sound. So the child will be startled, turn around, and it's like, what did I do? Okay? And so on. So there's things going there. Then as the child begins to grow, certain other problems come up. And that's when you begin to find that the child is not making eye contact. The child is withdrawing from social activity, prefers to stay alone, stays fixated on maybe a particular toy or something. And we're not helping these days because, the television is a good means of distraction for the child, for a busy mother who has no help. So she puts a cartoon and she goes to do what she's doing.
Right.
So the child now grows so used to interacting with this screen that it also limits their social interaction. So when you take that child maybe to a friend's home where there are more kids, the child is not interested in playing. The child would rather focus on either a toy or television. And as long as they're not interacting, they're not being challenged. And this also affects their ability to develop and grow.
Right. Okay, which is why, obviously, growing up, there was a lot more emphasis on playing with toys and all of that. But, going back to something you had said about children not responding sometimes when you're calling, being a sign. I remember that when my second daughter was about 5, I had a concern because every time you tried to draw her attention to something, she didn't hear. I was worried, did she hear? After a while, I thought, did she have a hearing problem? And when the next time we went on holiday outside the country, I actually had her tested, her ears tested, and it turned out she was fine. It just turns out that she zones out, right? When she gets carried away by something, she's carried away. She just doesn't hear. She indeed doesn't hear you somehow. So is that a problem?
It is a problem because, like I said, they're getting fixated. But it's also something we need to understand that there's a lot more to it. So you said something at the beginning that we have to include eye tests. We have to include hearing tests at very early stages so that we begin to catch it. If you go online, you would find that kids abroad, and I'm quite happy to say that I'm beginning to see even some kids in Nigeria now, the 1-year-old kids with, glasses on, or, they have to use some kind of strap, elastic band to keep it on. And then you find even maybe some of them using hearing aids. There's a brilliant video of a little child that was deaf, And the first time they put a hearing aid on this child, she was struggling to take it off. It was like, it's uncomfortable, it is. And then,
after a while,
just within a few seconds, you heard the mother's voice. And you could have seen how the face just lit up. So you could see the difference. And the same thing with these little kids. When they put the glasses on them, suddenly there's focus. Suddenly they can reach out and touch. Now, we also have kids that are blind, deaf in one ear or partially deaf in one ear. So when you talk to them from one side, they hear and they respond. When you talk from the other side, they don't. So parents need to understand that there's a lot more to checking on these children and making sure they're doing all right, and so on.
Okay, so sorry to cut you short. So in terms of, learning disability for children, what are the opportunities then for parents who can't do anything or who don't have the means to do anything about it? What is being done? What can be done, one, to create awareness that this may be a challenge? Secondly, how can they get access to this? And then before you answer that, I think we'll go on a break before you answer that. And then I'd also like to talk about another statement that you made about coming down to their level, because sometimes I don't think it's coming down to their level. Sometimes it's just approaching them in a different way. And you will talk about some prominent examples of children who have excelled regardless of whatever the world may call learning disability. We will be right back.
The Aspire Coronation Trust, ACT Foundation, is a non-profit organization established to help local, national, and regional non-profit organizations working to address the challenges and associated vulnerabilities across Africa. Here, we seek to promote broad-based participation with other institutions and organizations aimed at building sustainable communities, providing innovative solutions to social, economic, and environmental challenges. Our vision is to leverage relationships to create effective social impact solutions across Africa, with the mission to build sustainable societies by engaging initiatives that unleash potential and empowers beneficiaries. At ACT Foundation, our interventions are focused on 4 key areas, which are health, entrepreneurship, environment, and leadership. At ACT Foundation, we believe that together we can make a difference. So, let's come together to make the positive social impact we desire in our world.
Before we went on a break, I was asking Mr. Gbadebo what he thought about awareness and how people can seek help. And I was going to talk about some celebrity persons with learning disabilities. I just wanted to remind us about the numbers to call, though. The number to call before we continue with the conversation is 0700 93 93 93, 0700 93 93 93. Okay, so Mr. Gbadebo, so I was going to say that, we know popular persons like Stephen Hawking with motor neuron disease, and Albert Einstein, who was purportedly suffered from perhaps a form of autism and who was sent out of school because they thought he would never be able to learn. These guys have proven to be more, shall I say, more intelligent than us everyday people who go about, talking big and everything. So what do you think about that? So do you think that is coming down to their level to learn, or did they have to come down to their level to learn, or did they just approach it differently?
Well, you see, you're using people who... Stephen Hawking was 26 when he was affected by motor neuron disease. He was already in the university. He had already learned. He had already showed he was intelligent. At the time of Einstein, it was like, and which is what we're still struggling with here, where we have a prescribed way of learning, where you're teaching some basic things at a certain age where the child must be able to do. And when the child is not doing that, it happens. You see, we have to be careful here between what we call learning disability. Learning disability is where right from the childhood you have problem in placing that child in school. That was what Albert Einstein... Now, when you have problem placing that child in school, when you have attention deficit disorder, the child is, constantly smacking every other child and just uncontrollable. what do our teachers or what does most schools say is take the child home or take the child away?
Which is
that
what
doesn't
happened to
solve
Einstein.
the problem. What solves the problem? Today, at that time, people didn't know. Now people know that there's attention deficit disorder, and medication can be used to calm that child down.
Okay.
Even food. I mean, like for autistic children, there are certain things that sugar and all that spike up certain irrational behaviors.
I met a lady who says she doesn't eat any carbohydrates, she doesn't eat biscuits and all of that, because she says that as soon as she gets any of those things in her system, she feels things crawling up her hands. And she was diagnosed with ADHD early on. And, what they had to do for her was actually get her a bouncing ball in school for her to learn. So she couldn't sit still. And obviously it was affecting her learning. So what did they do? She's actually about 40. So it means that, some people have obviously figured out that these things happen a while back, even though some of us some people are slower to cutting on to this progress. And they got her one of those gym type balls so she could sit and bounce during class. And, she has a PhD now. So obviously, more people need to be aware. So going back to our awareness question, do you think that people used to, so you mentioned, more children wearing glasses and all of that. So I was wondering, is it because in the past people used to think that people would laugh at them, there was some stigma?
No, we didn't discover the fact that they had vision problems.
Right, okay.
Okay, we didn't recognize that they had hearing problems. Okay, so once, like I said, the child looked good, had all the basic features of a normal child.
Right.
We assumed the child was normal.
Right.
And then, you see, one problem you must recognize is that most parents they live in denial of the fact that a child is not hitting milestones.
Yes.
So it's like, a couple of ladies go visiting a woman with about a 3-year-old child, and the child is clinging to mommy and is not speaking well and is not doing certain things. And everybody is uncomfortable, but nobody is ready to bail the cat and say something's wrong with your child.
Yes.
And once they leave, someone says, did you notice that child?
Absolutely.
Everybody said, I did, and
Yes.
then so on and so forth.
Yes.
So, you see, the truth is that for such parents, it's a third party, a neutral party, usually the school or the nurse. When you go for the
We have a call. Hello.
Good evening.
Good evening. Hi.
Wow, I don't call you sis now. You are just talking, giving us ideas. I can't tie yourself.
Don't you want ideas? Hi.
Well, it's good. Yeah, it's good. Because people are trying to call because of the time. That is what.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay, introduce yourself and make a comment.
Now, your brother now. Sisters,
long time.
No, well, even though I don't call in your program, but I do listen, and I do encourage callers to please call in that are having such situation or problem concerning their health issue. And is it the doctor in the studio? Let me greet him now. Doctor, good evening.
I'm not. Anyway, thank God.
I'm really enjoying the advice and encouragement so that you are really giving people, because health is wealth. And please, I want people to please call in. I don't have much to say, but I normally appreciate the program. And also, I'm learning one or two things that will help me in future.
Okay.
Instead of I should be wasting money, but when I do it practical at home, I get more good feedback than going local places to go and bring problem more.
Thank you. Thank you, Sixes. Thank you. So if you have children, so please listen and learn. And, for your neighbors in Abulegba, just, tell them, if you notice anything. Okay, so Doc, you were saying, apologies. We have very, committed and passionate callers.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. So, like I was saying, there are things that we have to be very, very mindful of. Like I said, it takes someone who understands, and that's why we have special educators.
Right.
But we can't have enough, there's no way you can have enough special educators. And so what we're advising is that schools to have at least one special educator minimum. And then hold regular workshops for all the teachers to understand disability, particularly the disabilities and learning disabilities. That way, when you are in a class and you notice a child that is not performing well, you draw the attention of the special educator who can now help with initial assessment and then hopefully recommend to the parents that the child goes for further assessments. And then, you see, people are throwing names around these days. All the names are not the same. If a child stammers and you make fun of the child, or you put the child in front of the class, the child is going to stop talking. Okay? If a child tries
forcing them to do what every child would do.
Well, because you see, everybody's laughing at them.
Obviously.
And so, what do? They stop talking. There are so many reasons.
And probably develop anger issues as well.
Exactly, and so on. Also, if a child is unable to communicate, having some speech problems, like you said, there'll be anger issues, and you'd find them throwing tantrums in class and doing certain things. Now, let's understand something. Children can be very wicked.
Very mean.
And so there are some children who can now make it their point of duty to constantly bully this child. And so many things will happen. So you'd find a child who has problems with diction, with pronunciation, with, who is dyslexic or who has dyscalculia, who has problems with calculations and all. If they're being picked on, they'll start avoiding class.
So, sir, as a special needs parent, you have 1 minute. Can you tell us what are some practical things that parents who have special needs children can do, or teachers who aren't trained but have children that are yet to be diagnosed with special needs in their classes? Like, what can we do to support them?
Well, I told you earlier about coming down to their level, and you were saying, you see,
coming down?
Coming down to their level is that somebody is not where you expect them to be. Okay? And you have to go down, and instead of saying you're not doing like your brother, you're not doing like your sister, you have to come down and look at wherever they are.
Okay.
He could be 10 and behaving like he's 3 years old.
Okay.
Now, accept him as a 3-year-old. That means engaging him or her at that level.
Yes.
And then, gradually beginning to find out what they like to do and all. Eye contact is very important.
Eye contact.
And then, of course, love and care. Screaming at them and all doesn't help. So nobody is going to be... there's no better expert on your child than yourself.
Yep.
But unfortunately, these days, we find that parents are, contracting out
everything
the care.
To
you get a nanny, you got a driver, you get everything, and you rush out in the morning, you come back late at night. All you do is just put down the money. Saturday, there's an Owambe. Sunday, there's a church program. So you really don't have time to bond with this kid.
So parents, that's the last word for you. You have to find time to be there for your children. Caregivers, be attentive. Thank you all so much for listening to the Good Citizen Radio Show. And we've been talking about learning disabilities and how we can manage them. I hope you've learned a thing or two. You can follow us at Good Citizen NG on all our social media handles. And I hope you have a wonderful week. My name is Bekeme, and you've been listening to the Good Citizen Radio Show. Have a great week.